Sure. And just to be clear, I am a much bigger fan of deterministic algorithms than randomized ones, right? And that's because my history, of my academic history at least, was very much on the deterministic side. Nowadays, though, obviously, randomized algorithms, they rule everything. That's all we want to talk about now, right? So I know you asked me to give some practical advice. And so rather than just talking about it, I thought I would show you what I've been doing and give you some thoughts about how I got here. So I don't know if the guys that are doing the things, they want to bring the thing up. Now, most of the time when we do LLMs, right, we're talking about doing something on a cloud-based something or other, right? I've got an OpenAI thing, I've got an Azure thing, whatever. I'm going to stuff all my data in that and I'm going to run it. Here is the problem. Well, there's three really big problems with that every time I tried to do this for a large national scale telco. First of all, it's too expensive. Every single time you run a query, it's like $5. Second of all, you got to get all your data there, which, as you know, when you're doing anything, either RAN or LAN, or any kind of access network for that matter, the data set is unbelievably large, right? Terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes. And if you don't have all that data, you can't really make a good decision anyway. Third problem is that you really need to also move not only the data, you need to move the security policies. Moving all of that into the cloud, pain in the butt. So really what you need to do is you need to put the AI engine, the LLM thing, the RAG thing, the vector search, all of that right on top of your data set. That is, based on the last 2 years of me banging my head against this, the only reasonable way to do it. And once you've done that, then you can, in an affordable way, because we're trying to solve, like you were saying, right? Find the problem, solve the problem quickly. In fact, if you've got like a problem area, you get like 37 of those problems at the same time. So if you go and you take those 37 problems and turn it into 1,000 queries into a web something or other, first of all, you got to move 7 terabytes of data there. You can't do that. But let's say you could do that. Now that's just cost you like $10,000, right? And you can't do that every single time. So you got it here, you got it on top. You got your GPU, you got your LLM right on top of the RAG, the VSS, right on top of your data. Okay, so you start with that. Then you can get what I have on the next slide. And I would strongly suggest everybody try this, because this is kind of baseline output that you get from an LLM if you do very straightforward prompt engineering. I'm talking so straightforward, anybody, people that don't even do computer science, can get this. But the trick to making this work for your telco, be it on the radio access side or the fixed access side, or in the case of what I happen to be helping a bunch of telcos with on the Wi-Fi offload of RAN or the high density of fixed access side, right? Any of those things, right? You can get this, and this is pretty cool. So once you get here, then I think now you have a foundation for which you can do make your next move, right? Because if you don't get here, by the way, the problem is you don't have a platform by which you can run LLM in a cost-efficient and effective manner. So this should be your baseline. And I'm sure all of you guys have used, the chat GPTs of the world and whatever, right? Have you noticed what it's really good at? Summarization, right? If you pass it like a pile of stuff, it seems to do a really good job of telling you kind of this is what it's about, right? So that's what you've got here. So as long as you've got this as your baseline, you know you can build on it, right? So now I want you to, if possible, go back one, and I want you to point out something specifically on this, right? So now if you go and you take your radio metrics and your client metrics and all that and you stuff it into this, which reminds you what I said was that if you try to do this in the cloud version, you're in trouble because it's not going to happen, and or you're going to run into CISO violations, blah, 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 right? And it's just going to be too big anyways. But let's say you manage to get all this done somehow, be it cloud or be it this way. Then, 2 slides forward, please. You can end up with this. This requires a little more sophisticated prompt engineering than what you'd get with the first one. The first one anyone can do, even no background or anything. Here, I want you to look at the bottom. So remember what you said? You were like, my big problem is I got problems. That's why it's my big problem, because I got problems. The question is, how can I get this stuff to tell me what these problems are and what to do to fix them? And mind you, like I started this with, right, I'm a big fan of deterministic stuff, not this randomized stuff, but I give it to this stuff, right? Like this randomized stuff, even though I'm not a fan of it, if you do a good enough job at the prompt engineering and you manage to build it on a platform that makes sense, that being the harder part actually, then you can get this, which is awesome, right? Because now all of a sudden I do have that cost reduction. I can throw this at a place where my ARPU is whatever you were saying, $5 or whatever, right? I can do this, it's an effective, I can do this at scale, right? So this kind of feels pretty good. And I just want to leave you with one more thing. So if you go to the next slide, this is that diagram again. On the bottom left there, that proprietary data that you throw into this doesn't have to be proprietary, it can be public data. And this doesn't have to sit in the CO. This particular thing, I happen to not only be doing it in the CO, I actually do them on prems occasionally if the prem is big enough. And so some fairly large airports, kind of partner, or like now is, I don't know why we say the word partner. Can I just say like what we actually do? Some fairly big airports buy my stuff, right? I mean, so that being the case, we put it on the prem, and then the proprietary data may not be proprietary, and then you can get this. Check this out. Exactly the same platform. And if you were to ask ChatGPT, without any additional context, where can I get breakfast at this airport I happen to be, it might come up with something or it might not, right? But if you load a data set into that shows it where the location of you are, where's that from? The radiometrics I showed you before. If you add to that all of the static data of what there is for sale, and maybe that's not static, that could be dynamic. And then you add to that some general information about, the layout and stuff like that, you can get this, which is way cooler than, oh, I don't know, or maybe. Now, go to the next slide, check this out. I'm a big fan of eating oatmeal first thing, okay? And I want to know when I'm flying through, I also am a big fan of flying first flight, usually it gets out, right? And I want to know where I'm going to get oatmeal because I can't go through security with oatmeal. They don't let me get through. So this is my favorite question. Can you imagine asking this to a cloud LLM without the correct RAG? You would get garbage. So that same tech that fixes the problems, good for the ARPU on the right platform, you could do this, and potentially you could even throw this out and do level 1 support. And once again, I'm going to finish this with, I am not a fan of randomized algorithms, right? But like, you got to give it to it. Sometimes some of this stuff works. And honestly, practical advice, right? You got to worry about these 3 things. I have spent the last 2 years banging my head against this. So my practical advice is understand that if you do this, in a cloud thing, you're going to run into some problems. It's going to be too expensive. You can't move all that radiometrics out there, and moving the security out there is too much of a pain in the butt. So that's my practical advice. So do this on the edge, hook it up to your telemetry, do some prompt engineering, and build and discover for yourself a platform from which you can build on top of these things. So that's my advice.